Hi girls, gays, and theys, my name is Jess and welcome back to my channel, Books Past Bedtime. If you're a frequent viewer of my channel, you may have noticed that I have not filmed a wrap-up for the past 3 months. This is going to be my comprehensive summer reading wrap-up. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in June, July, and August, and I'm even going to be ranking them for you from worst to best so that you can know which ones I approve and think you should also read and which ones you should probably avoid. I do have 31 books to talk about in this video today, so I will not be doing extensive descriptions of every book. I'm just going to kind of give an overview, a quick synopsis, if you will, and tell you what my rating, just because I don't want this video to be 5 million hours long. So that is the plan, and without further ado, let's just hop right into it. So first off, the very worst book that I read this summer was called Kel's Keeper by Casey Wells. I actually did not rate this book because I DNF'd it, and if I did rate it, I would give it 1 star. But this was my only DNF for the whole summer, and it is a male-male age gap romance. I believe it was supposed to be like the daddy trope, but I didn't get to that point of the book. Basically, these two characters are neighbors, and the younger character, his parents tragically die, and he's kind of left spiraling, and his older neighbor, who he's always had a crush on, steps in to kind of help him out and help take care of him, figure out what to do, that kind of thing. I just found this book to be poorly written. I did not enjoy the discussions of body hair that went on in this book. That's not my thing. It's not my kink. If it's yours, great. Regardless, I did not think that this book was well written. I didn't like the characters. I thought it was too dramatic and slow burn for what I was looking for. So I did end up DNFing it, I think probably like 10 to 20% in. The worst book that I read in the summer that I actually finished was Can't Resist Her by Kiana Alexander. This is a contemporary sapphic romance. In this book, we're following Summer and Aiko. Summer and Aiko knew each other from high school. They kind of had a moment of connection in high school, but nothing ever came of it. But Summer has kind of always harbored a crush on Aiko, and Aiko for Summer as well. So when Summer moves back to their hometown, her and Aiko reconnect, and a little romance is reignited between them. But this new romance is not easy because Aiko is employed by this developer who is tearing down the school that they went to and building like this new, I don't know, retail center in. And Summer has partially moved back to this town to save and preserve the school because her grandmother founded it. This creates a lot of conflict in their relationship. They have this like innate chemistry. I had a lot of issues with this book. I just did not find it very enjoyable to read. I thought the writing was very juvenile. It was very tell, not show. I felt like I was being talked at. A lot of the dialogue was really stilted and awkward. I'm not a fan. Also, the romance itself was just kind of icky, like the way things were talked about. I didn't enjoy. The sex scenes were kind of like sudden and just very like aggressive. Like they didn't fit with the tone of the book. I don't know. I didn't enjoy them. I thought they were kind of, they were just kind of gross. I don't know how to explain why I didn't like that, but I just did not vibe with this book at all. It also weirdly read as like gentrification propaganda because the development was seen as a good thing and a good thing for the community at the end of the day, which I thought was an interesting stance to take and didn't really make sense, but whatever. I don't know. I ended up giving this book 1 star. I didn't really like it. My other 1-star read of the summer was The Romance Recipe by Ruby Barrett. This book follows Amy and Sophie. Amy is a restaurant owner and Sophie is her head chef, and they strike up a romance between one another, and there's issues of like having to save the restaurant and Amy like having trouble letting go of control and letting Sophie like be an actual head chef, things of that nature. I do love cooking, and I love books set in a cooking world. I love cooking shows. I love all of that kind of stuff. So a sapphic romance set in a kitchen has sounded amazing to me, but I just did not like how this book was executed. I didn't enjoy the writing. The dialogue between the characters was very cringe, and I think my least favorite part about this book was the sex scenes. They just were written grossly, and also a lot of them happened in the kitchen. Like, this is very unsanitary and I don't like it. And why are we fucking on the worktop? Why are we fucking in the freezer where the food is? This is gross. You run a real restaurant. Maybe this is why your restaurant is failing. I don't know. I didn't like it. It made me feel uncomfy. this book got a 1 star from me. Next on the list is Dear Daddy, Please Praise Me by Luna David. I gave this book 2 stars. I like a good daddy romance every once in a while. Sue me. This one wasn't that good. I do like Luna David's other like daddy books, so that's why I read this one. But this was like a Christmas book, and the guys met on like this dating app, and it was just like poorly written. It felt like it was like quickly written without a lot of editing, so that bothered me a little bit. And also the characters just not fully developed, you know. Like it was fine, and I mean, I gave it 2 stars because it did some of the things I wanted it to do, but at the end of the day, not that great of a book. Another book that got 2 stars from me was The Other Man by Farhad Dadi-Bajor. I don't know how to say the name, I'm so sorry. This was a contemporary romance set in India. In it, we're following our main character, Ved, who is a closeted gay man, and he really has all of these expectations of his family on his shoulders because his family owns this like business empire in Mumbai, and they really want to arrange him to marry a woman that will increase their like business empire kind of thing. So they find him someone to marry, and he ends up really liking her, but in like a friend way. And on the side, on Tinder, he meets this other man that he kind of starts a friendship with, a relationship with. Then he becomes conflicted on whether he's gonna follow through with this arranged marriage or if he should pursue what he truly wants. This book, unlike the others that I've talked about so far, I think was well written. I think some of the dialogue was unrealistic or kind of cringy, but this was definitely a better written story than the others. But the main character just drove me insane. Like, he just created so many reasons for himself to be miserable, so many excuses. I know it's difficult and everyone has a different coming out journey, but it was just very frustrating to read from this character's point of view. Just really frustrating how he treated the people around him as well. Like the woman he was engaged to be married to, he genuinely was like really liked her and really good friends with her, but he just could not be honest with her. Like, he doesn't even have to come out, but just tell her that he sees her as a friend, you know, like. And the same thing with the man he was seeing on the side. Like, he wasn't honest with him either about really the situation he was in, and just treated him really shitty. Like, he just treated the people in his life really shitty, and I just did not enjoy reading about that. So this book ended up getting 2 stars from me as well. And the last 2-star book on the list is Book Boyfriend by Chris Ripper. This was an interesting one. I also don't think this was the best book I've ever read, and it also had a very frustrating main character in it. Our main character's name is PK, and PK has been in love with his best friend Art for many, many years. And instead of just telling Art that he's in love with him, PK writes this entire book about being the perfect book boyfriend to a character that is very similar to Art. Publishes it and everything, and does not tell anyone that he has written it. And Art ends up being a big fan of this book and really liking it, and the way that he finds out PK wrote it is he goes to an author event for the book. He gets pissed, and PK doesn't understand why he's pissed. It's just so stupid. Like, it's just such a ludicrous situation that this book puts its characters in. I didn't like how PK treated Art. PK was a stupid, quirky, weird main character. Hopefully this is not in self-insert and I'm not offending the author, but I really just did not vibe with this book. I thought it was really goofy, and it was very, very slow burn. Like, just ridiculously so. So yeah, 2 stars. Didn't really like it, and talking about it, I feel like I want to put it below the other 2-star books now. Maybe I ranked these out of order. Next book on my list is The Summer of Impossibilities by Rachel Allen. This is the book that I actually finished most recently. This is a YA contemporary romance that follows, it's not really romance, it's just a YA contemporary. It follows 4 girls who are like childhood friends in that their moms were friends. They're not super close, but they all are going to spend the summer together at this lake house owned by 2 of the girls' family because their mom is getting divorced. So we're following Skylar, Scarlett, Amelia Grace, and Ellie, and they all have different goals for the summer. Scarlett has juvenile arthritis that she's dealing with, telling her mom that it's getting really worse, even though her mom is getting divorced, so she's dealing with her own shit, so Skylar feels like she can't talk about it. Scarlett has this boyfriend that she's trying to figure out if she really wants to date him or not. Amelia Grace is in love with Scarlett, and Ellie just wants to be friends with everyone. So it's a very like juvenile kind of book. I feel like it would be fun for just like a summer high school read, and I might have liked it better when I read it then, but it definitely is not a YA that transcends age group, so I didn't really love it. I also didn't love the writing. I thought it was very like, I felt like I was being talked at again, which I don't vibe with, so this book ended up getting 2.5 stars for me. I don't think it was bad, it just wasn't for me. Another book that just wasn't for me was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. It's the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. We've been reading it for Fan Series Book Club, and this is definitely not one of the most successful picks for me personally, but that's okay. A lot of other people like this book. I just didn't really jive with it. Basically, it's a fantasy set in kind of an apocalyptic world that kind of poses the question, like, what would the world be like if we continue to let the climate crisis accelerate, take out the world, that kind of thing. And we're following these like 3 different point of views, 3 different age groups, and how they interact with and experience the world, I think kind of in different time periods. I just didn't like this book because I thought it was a little confusing. It a little bit went over my head. Also, there's no romance in it really, and it's just very depressing. It just is not my kind of book, which is fine. It's a lot of other people's kind of book, just not for me, so 2.5 stars. Next on my list is Echo by Chani Lynn Feener. This book is it almost is like a dark academia book. It's also sci-fi, it's also a dark romance. It's a lot of different things. I found this randomly on Kindle Unlimited when I was kind of in the mood to maybe like try out a dark romance. I'm not typically a dark romance girly, and it was a little bit too dark for me. Like, I am willing to admit that to you guys. It was too dark for me. I'd like a little bit of sweetness in my romance. I like the possessive main character, but I like them to be just like devoted to their partner, not controlling of their partner, I guess. I don't know. It was just a little too much for me. Basically, it's also kind of mafia. Our 2 main characters are called Rabbit and Mikhail, and Rabbit is like a meek, shy main character who's being abused by his mother, and he is also like a musical prodigy. And so when Mikhail sees him for the first time, he's like instantly infatuated with him, instantly thinks that Rabbit is going to be his, to keep, to possess, all of those kinds of things, and he does that. There's a little bit of dubcon in this book, which is historically never been my favorite, and I didn't like it here. I don't know why I thought that would be different. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this book. I didn't hate it. I think I ended up giving it 2.75 stars, 3 stars. Like, I liked aspects of it, and I would have really liked Rabbit and Mikhail's romance if it had just been like a little bit nicer. Like, if it had just been a little bit more sweet. It was just too, like, I was like, Mikhail, do you even like Rabbit, or you just like hurting him? It was just too much for me again. I know I just keep saying that, but yeah. Probably won't try much more dark romance in the future. Next on my list is Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall, and I'm very sad that this one is so low. I think this is the lowest I've ever rated an Alexis Hall book before. I typically love his books so much, like regardless of genre, regardless of what subject matter is, I usually love it. But this book, it just didn't vibe with me. In this book, we're following Maylis and Lady Georgiana. Maylis has this curse put on her, and Georgiana is supposed to be kind of like a witch, potentially. So Maylis and Georgiana end up kind of teaming up to try and figure out this curse that's on Maylis. This is a historical fantasy book. Lady Georgiana is supposed to be based on like a brooding, dark, hard shell to crack Austen hero, and I think she was just a little bit too much for me. She was just kind of mean and rude. I just wanted her to be nicer, at least by the end of the book, and she wasn't. She was just cold the whole book. So I never really felt the romance. I never was really rooting for the romance, which is usually what Alexis Hall does so good. That was the main reason I didn't like this one. I gave it 3 stars. The plot was also a little bit confusing. It was a little bit all over the place. It was kind of almost like there were multiple plot elements. This one was just okay, unfortunately. Next is Bonds of Brass by Emily Scretsy. This is a male-male romance set in a sci-fi world. In it, we're following Etienne and Val, who are kind of like destined to be rivals because Gal is the heir to the Umber Empire, and everything in Etienne's life was ruined by the Umber Empire, but they are at this pilot school together and become best friends. Etienne doesn't know that Gal originally is the heir to the Umber Empire, and so when his life is threatened at this academy, Etienne just kind of acts on instinct and saves Gal and kind of has to decide where his loyalties lie throughout the course of the book. He's always kind of had a crush on Gal as well, so this complicates matters even more. I liked this book, but I wanted it to feel like Winter's Orbit, and that was probably unfair of me to put those expectations on this book because it is not Winter's Orbit. I just expected there to be more of a romance to this book, and while there definitely is like a romance. Like, you know that there's kind of a will they, won't they thing going on between Gal and Etienne. In their like internal monologue, I think this book just follows Etienne, but he like goes back and forth on whether he likes Val at all, which I was not a fan of. I was like, if you're not going to be together, you need to be pining for him. That's not how this works, okay? I need to know that you guys are supposed to be together and want to be together, and I did not feel that in this book. So that's the main reason why I got 3 stars. I did like the plot. I liked the sci-fi world. I thought it was fun and exciting. To really please me, you need to have a strong romance, and this book did not. So 3 stars, and I don't know if I'm going to continue with the series or not. A Dash of Salt and Pepper by Kisoko Jackson is the next on my list. I was kind of surprised by this book. I was putting off reading it because I really did not enjoy I'm So Not Over You by Kisoko Jackson, which was his previous release, but A Dash of Salt and Pepper pleasantly surprised me. I had some of the same issues, but I definitely liked it a lot more, and I ended up giving it 3.25 stars. This is another boss-employee romance set in a kitchen. This one also has an age gap. All good things. All things that I liked and all things that I enjoyed. It is also kid fic. The older character, Logan, has a daughter. I loved seeing Xavier interact with Logan's daughter. I thought it was super cute, and I thought their relationship development made more sense and was more well laid out than Kisoko Jackson's previous release. I did have some of the same issues with the writing. I thought there was like too many metaphors, too many like tangents in the internal dialogue of the main character, and I also just think there's a lot of like needless pop culture references that I don't like, that just like date the book instantly. Those were my main problems. It definitely isn't a favorite, but I was very pleasantly surprised with this one. Next on my list is The Magic Between by Stephanie Hott. This book I gave 3.5 stars to, and this is kind of one of the most like interesting books on this list plot-wise. It was a little convoluted, I'm not gonna lie, but it was cute at the end of the day. In this book, we're following AB and Matthew. They are both kind of famous in their own right. AB is a pop star and Matthew is an NHL hockey player. So we have like a pop star romance and a hockey romance in a mashup, but this is also a fantasy because AB is magical. And the reason I picked this book up is because it has the bonding trope in it. And I love a good bond trope, but this bond trope didn't live up to my expectations, which is one of the reasons why I gave it a lower rating. The bonding wasn't like super obvious. It didn't have any like cool elements to it. So it was kind of just like a non-starter almost. And I didn't think the writing in this book was exceptional either. There was some cringy dialogue moments. It was a little bit unpolished, I would say, and it kind of read as like a weird mix between YA and adult. So yeah, I don't know. I think it would have been better if it had had a couple more rounds of editing and it was like full-fledged adult novel. Also, it just had a little bit too much going on. So I had a couple issues with it. Overall, not a bad book, but like not a great one, you know? That's why it's here in the middle of the ranking. Next on my list is Act Cool by Toby McSmith. This is a YA contemporary book with a trans main character. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I did like Toby McSmith's debut book better than this one. This one just fell a little bit flat for me, and it was a little bit too like juvenile for me. I didn't think it was necessarily a YA that transcended age group, and me as a 26-year-old needs a YA book that transcends age group, because this book just wasn't for me, you know? But it definitely was far from bad. In it, we're following our main character, August, who has promised his parents that if he moves to New York and goes to this prestigious acting school, he will not come out as trans, but he does not follow through on this. He lives as himself at this school and is really trying to make his acting dreams come true. So when his parents are gonna come see him in the final play, this complicates things. This is basically just kind of a coming of age story set in New York, which I loved, and it's very like musical theater nerd inspired, which I like musicals casually, but I'm not like a musical theater person, so I probably didn't get some of it. But yeah, it was good. I liked it. 3.5 stars. Not a favorite, but a solid read. Kind of in a similar vein is Honey and Issues Guide to Fake Dating by Adiba Jagadar. This is another YA contemporary book. This involves, though, a sapphic romance with the fake dating trope. It's following Honey and Issue, who are 2 girls in high school, and they decide to fake date. Honey I think is the one that initiates the fake dating scheme because she wants to prove her bisexuality to her friends who invalidate her when she comes out. And Issue agrees because she is trying to be head girl because she's an overachiever, wants to get into the best college, and being head girl would put her on the map. Honey is one of the most popular girls at the school, so she believes that by being linked to her, she will get more votes, be more likely to achieve this head girl position. But of course, along the way, despite the two not really vibing with each other in the beginning, they begin to fall for one another. It was a very cute story. It definitely is younger YA, I would say, and not necessarily for an audience outside of YA, but I did enjoy it. I think it was written a little bit juvenile, like, and some of the dialogue wasn't the best. Again, I wasn't impressed by the writing. I would have edited a little bit more, that kind of thing, but at the core it was a cute story and I did like it, and I gave this one, I don't know if I said this, 3.5 stars. All right, I took a little break because I had already been filming for 30 minutes and I was getting burnt out, but we're halfway through, so let's keep it pushing. And I do think I've been over explaining these books a little bit. I'm gonna reel it back so that I can get through this video. So with that being said, the next book on my list is Never Have I Ever Had a Bromance with a Teammate by Willow Dixon. I have read the first two books in this series earlier this year and really enjoyed them, particularly the second book. Still probably my favorite. I loved that one, gave it 5 stars. This one only got 3.5 from me, and honestly it's probably my least favorite in the series. This is a friends to lovers gay awakening kind of story, or bi awakening kind of story, I guess, between two athletes. It was really cute and fun. Historically, friends to lovers trope isn't my favorite. I also thought that this one happened a little quickly. I don't know, their dynamic just wasn't my favorite. They were just too bro-y for me a little bit. So yeah, 3.5 stars. It was a good read. I do like Willow Dixon. I think she's a good like contemporary romance male author, but not my favorite in the series. 3.5 stars. Next on my list is The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schaefer. I was really excited for this book. This is was kind of pitched to me as like a YA version of Winter's Orbit. I can see where that comparison comes from. It's a sci-fi, it's a male-male romance, but I feel like the similarities kind of end there. I definitely didn't enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed Winter's Orbit. That's definitely a hard like threshold to meet. My biggest problem with this book was that it ended up being very repetitive. It almost is kind of like a Groundhog's Day situation type of deal. Because of that like repetitive nature, it also made it difficult for me to believe in the romance because they kind of like forgot everything every time the day restarted. So I'm like, do you guys really like each other? There was not enough like pining for me, I think, exacerbated by the fact that it was a Groundhog's Day situation. Also, the ending was very lackluster and very sudden. There was a point in this book where it was like so awesome and so exciting and I couldn't believe what was happening, but then it just kind of petered out by the end. I was a little bit let down by this one. I did end up I enjoyed it. It was written well. There was just some issues that I had with it personally, so I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, which is a weirdly specific rating, but that's what I felt about it. Next book on my list is Lavender House by A.C. Rosen. This book I also gave 3.75 stars. This is a kind of like closed door mystery type of book, and it follows a man who was fired from the police for being gay. This is the 1950s. Because of this, he is hired by this woman whose wife was murdered in her own home, really wants to get to the bottom of it, but doesn't want to involve the police because she lives in this place called the Lavender House that her and her wife kind of created together as a safe haven for people who are gay in the 1950s, and they can kind of, as long as they're behind these walls, be themselves. And so our main character kind of finds this safe haven in the Lavender House, but also there's definitely something sinister going on. Someone has definitely wronged this family and he's gonna get to the bottom of it. I really enjoyed this one. It just wasn't as like exciting and thrilling as I wanted it to be, and I just thought some of the character dynamics were kind of strange. It just didn't give me like a 5-star feeling kind of book. Like, it was a fun read. It was a 3.75 read, but it wasn't anything immaculate, you know? But I would be interested to read from this author in the future because I believe this was a debut, so I would imagine it would only be up from here because this book was very well written. It just didn't give me the feelings that I wanted to feel, you know? All right, all the rest of these books on this list are 4 stars and higher, which I think is pretty good. About a third of the books 4 stars and higher, so really enjoyed the rest of these. Would for sure recommend them to almost anyone. And the first of which is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This book I gave 4 stars to. I really enjoyed this one. This is a sapphic sci-fi book. Basically, it's set in this world where the multiverse has proven true, but in order to travel to a different universe, a different version of the current world, your corresponding like person in the other world has to be dead. So our main character is really good at dying in every world except the one that she's in. So she is prime candidate number one for multiverse travels. She has kind of been in love with her handler for a really long time. The plot of the story is that she is sent to this world where she is supposedly just died, just been murdered actually, and she goes over there to kind of, one, try and figure out why she was murdered, that's her own personal reason, but also just to collect data, explore a new world for the government. It turns out she's not actually dead in this other world, it was just kind of a ploy, and so she is grievously injured and has to figure out how to get out of this world. So it is a very interesting concept. I do love a multiverse story. I did really enjoy this one. I thought it was a little bit too slow, somewhat a little bit too gritty and dark for me. That's why it didn't get a full 5 stars, but I did think it was excellently written. I almost wish it would have been longer or like a series or something. I think this world definitely had the potential to be explored in greater detail in like a longer setting, a longer story. It definitely was a good one and I would recommend if you are interested. Next on my list is another Willow Dixon book, and this is Stepbrother Dearest. This book is a spin-off of the Never Have I Ever series. Basically, our main character is an exotic dancer. He's a stripper at this club and he has a romance with a stepbrother. I feel like every time I pick up a stepbrother romance, I'm like expecting it to be like kind of taboo. They never are for some reason. The ones that I read, that element of them is not really ever discussed. That's just basically how they know each other, which is fine, whatever. I did like this one. It was steamy and hot. I really don't remember that much about it. It really was not a memorable read. It was just like an in the moment fun time type of read, and I gave it 4 stars and apparently liked it better than The Space Between Worlds. I don't know what I was smoking when I made this ranking, but whatever. Next on my list is I Hear the Sunspot Volume 1 by Yuki Fumino. This is a manga. This was published almost 10 years ago, which I did not realize. I've seen it floating around before, but basically it was just this really cute story. It's kind of Grumpy Sunshine. It's between these two high schoolers who meet kind of randomly. One is hard of hearing and the other volunteers to be his note taker. The character that's hard of hearing is kind of ostracized in school. Everyone thinks he's rude because he never like answers them, but really he just can't hear them. Our other main character is just very like sunshiny, refuses to take no for an answer, like wants to help and befriend our hard of hearing character. I think our hard of hearing character ends up getting like a crush on the other character, and the other character is not gay as far as he knows. I don't know in future volumes if they're gonna have a romance. Kind of seems like that might be where they're headed, but this was basically just a cute story about friendship and helping people out and being there for one another, and it was super cute and I enjoyed it a lot. So I gave it 4 stars. My last book in the 4-star category, and apparently my favorite 4-star book, is called Accidental Bonds by Marie Renard. I read this book because I love a bonding trope. If you know me, you know I love a bonding trope, and that is the whole premise of this series. This is the first book in a series. It's a debut book, so the next books aren't out yet, but in this particular book we're following a shifter, a witch. In this world, shifters and witches have notoriously kind of had a bit of a like distrustful relationship. Our main character only hires our witch because he has no other option, and witches and shifters are able to form bonds, particularly when they're compatible. Unfortunately for these two, or fortunately as we come to find out, they're very, very compatible, like fated mates type of deal. So when they do this spell to protect the shifter lands, they accidentally bond, and they don't really realize that this has happened necessarily, but they keep like being drawn to one another, getting closer to each other. This bond starts to strengthen to the point where they're like, oh shit, we're bonded. Hence the title Accidental Bonding. So there's like this whole plot of somebody is attacking their shifter lands, something is negatively impacting them, the witch is trying to help them and get this off their lands, and meanwhile he's falling in love with the alpha of the pack, the shifter that hired him. So, and then he's bonded too, because they're just so compatible that it's impossible not to bond to each other. It's really cute. It's definitely a slow burn romance. They literally don't fuck until like 95% into the book, which is why it didn't get a 5-star for me. I think if they had gotten more together, if they had gotten together sooner, I would have liked it better. If you've heard me, I'm going to talk about Tavia Lark in a second, but I love Tavia Lark's books because they're the perfect mixture of like slow burn and actually like having content of the couple together. Usually her couples get together at the 50% mark. And that's just perfect for me because we have the pining slow burn for 50% of the book, and then we have the characters together for 50% of the book. So that is my personal perfect medium balance of plot and romance, pining and togetherness, slow burn, you know what I'm saying. So this book was just not quite that. It was a little too long, a little too much separation, lack of romance, but the plot was interesting, so I'm interested to see where this plot goes in future additions to the series. So yeah, I liked this one a lot. 4 stars, like a very strong 4-star. Next on my list is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This book I will talk about more in an upcoming vlog, but it is basically a fantasy sci-fi series following lesbian necromancers, and it's almost kind of like a Hunger Games type of situation going on, because like 2 like chosen one people from each of 9 or 8, each of 8 like planets, districts in this kingdom, in the space kingdom, go to planet number 1 to compete for this ability to like gain all this magical power, and to do so they have to solve these riddles, and they're in this like magical castle where they have to be finding all these keys and unlocking all these doors and solving all these riddles and solving all these magical tasks and challenges. That's like the main overarching plot of the story, which makes it very fun and exciting. We're following Gideon, who is the necromancer for Harrow, who is like the princess of the 9th district. So she's basically her sword in this challenge. Harrow is the brains of the operation, Gideon is the sword. Throughout the story, there's so much like romantic tension between them, and it's like, will they, won't they get together? I was just like screaming at them to make out the whole time because they literally hate each other the whole book. I really loved their dynamic. I really loved the story. I thought it was super exciting. It does take a little bit to get going because Harrow kind of leaves Gideon out of a lot of the like exciting challenges for a while, but then once she's in it, she's really in it, and it starts really picking up. So I gave this one 4.5 stars. Excellent. I really thought this was a lot of fun. I can't wait for that vlog to come out, and you'll hear my full thoughts in that vlog. And next, for my first 5-star on the list, we're going back to Willow Dixon and back to the Never Have I Ever series with Never Have I Ever Wanted My Brother's Rival. Like I said, 5 stars. This is like a soft 5 stars though, because in the grand scheme of things, is this book really 5 stars? No. Did I enjoy it enough to give it a 5-star in the moment? Yes. Basically, this is kind of like a little bit of an age gap romance, a little bit of like literally what the title says. Our main character falls for his brother's rival, who randomly comes back into his life because he is now the landlord of his like college house, and the 2 used to be friends in high school also, so it's almost like a little bit of a second chance situation. It was very cute, very steamy. I like Willow Dixon's books because she includes just like a little bit of kink, which makes it a little fun, a little spicy, a little different, but also at the core of it, the romance is like really sweet and cutie. So I like these books. I really liked this one. This one's probably my second favorite in the series, so would definitely recommend. Next on my list is Self-Made Boys by Anna Marie McLemore, and this is a book that I have had on my radar for a long time, and I'm glad I finally read it. I found it at the library. It is a YA retelling of The Great Gatsby, but make it queer, and both Nick and Gatsby are trans characters, which I loved, and I really loved this like romantic retelling of The Great Gatsby where Nick and Gatsby are in love. It was lovely. It was wonderful. It was so beautifully written. I underlined so many lines in this book because they just like punched me in the gut. Like they were so beautifully written and expressed such deep, profound, beautiful emotions and thoughts. Oh, I loved it. Underlined so many quotes, and I literally bought myself a physical copy of this book, which I rarely buy books that have already read. I just prefer collecting books I haven't read yet, but I bought a copy of this book so that I could highlight and mark it up because it was just incredible and I wanted to annotate it. I just felt the need and desire to. I really loved this book. Thought it was excellent. The only thing I would say about this book is I wish that it had not been YA. Not that I needed like smut or adult content in it. I just didn't like thinking of the characters as being 17, and I didn't like being reminded of the characters being 17. I wish they had been in their 20s or something, or their ages had just not been mentioned, because I found it a little bit hard to suspend my disbelief that 17-year-olds were getting into some of the situations that they were getting into. It just would have made more sense if they had been adults. Like, that's all I have to say about that, but it didn't take away from the story in any kind of big way, so I still think that this is a 5-star read. I really loved it. Next is one of the more recent books I've read, and that is Solomon's Crown by Natasha Siegel. This is another book that I just underlined the shit out of because it had so many beautiful lines in it that I just absolutely loved. I can see this book being super underrated because it has recently come out, but I haven't seen anyone talking about it. I will say, if you like loved The Song of Achilles, this book is what you need to read next because it was beautiful. It is a historical retelling of Richard the Lionheart and Philip of France. I don't really know European history that well, to be honest with you, which I will say is probably one of the reasons I enjoyed this book, because I don't know the true Philip and Richard of European history, because a lot of the reviews do mention that they were really bad men and they didn't like reading this book knowing that they were really bad men. This is a very like idealized, sunshiny rewriting of, it's not really sunshiny, that's a stretch, because this book definitely is brutal and there's war in it and it's sad and emotional and kind of devastating in parts, but it definitely is history with a happy ending. She does have a note in the beginning of the book that is like, this is not historically accurate, don't read it as historically accurate, this is basically fan fiction. What if this happened instead of this, kind of thing? And what if these two people were good people for the most part and they fell in love, kind of thing? So if you are big into European history, you might not like this book. I just don't feel right talking about this book without giving that caveat, but I really loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a really interesting historical romance. I loved the relationship between Richard and Philip and the way it developed. It was really beautiful. It felt like it could be realistic, and I just thought this book was super well written. Like, I just loved reading it. I loved the experience. I thought it was fantastic. It was really easy to give this book 5 stars once I finished it. And like I said, this would not be a Books Past Bedtime video without talking about Tavia Lark. So the next 3 books on this list are from Tavia Lark. So the first 2 are from her Radiant series, which is a little bit of an older series, and I had read the first book in the series, The Necromancer's Light, I think is what it's called. I'd read that book last year at some point. I really liked it. I don't know why I didn't continue with the series, but I finally continued with the series. I finally finished it. It's just a trilogy. Book 2, The Paladin's Shadow by Tavia Lark, is what is next on my list, and this is basically a age gap kidnapper romance, kind of, except the kidnapper is a good guy and he gives our other character a lot of free reign and explains the situation to him and why he kidnapped him and why he doesn't believe what he believes and converts him to his side. But it's like good and cute and fun. And this is set in the same fantasy world that a lot of her books are set in, and it involves magic and politics and things, but at the core of it is a super cute age gap romance that we love. I don't know how it might be my least favorite in the trilogy, but the whole trilogy got 5 stars, so who knows. But The Sword Witch's Heart by Tavia Lark, which is the 3rd book in the Radiant series, is by far my favorite. I freaking loved this book so much. I was literally sending quotes of it to my friend Gabby, like, Gabby, you need to read this book right now. Read it right now, because it is so good. So good. Why am I the only person reading Tavia Lark? Please, somebody be my friend. Read these books because they're so good. I promise, they're so good. They're so good. Anyway, this book is kind of like a friend. Well, they're not really friends. They're kind of enemies or like acquaintances who dislike each other but work together. But it turns out that one of them is actually a demon and the other is like, he's like a necromancer or a witch of some kind, I believe. The demon has always like had an infatuation with him, and he can tell, like, he gains his power when people like lust after him or are attracted to him, and he keeps noticing that someone in their party is attracted to him, and he's like, who the hell is attracted to me? I can't figure it out. And it's him. But he still acts like he hates him. But then they finally get together. I'm so excited talking about this book. Oh my god, I love it so much. It was so good. It was literally 5 stars and incredible. It was beautifully written. I highlighted so many things, which you can see if you want to follow me on Goodreads. I do make all of my highlights public, even though that's probably not a very smart thing to do because I highlight some raunchy shit, but I do love this book. It was so good. It was so good. It was so hot. And I love the dynamic of the relationship, and the 2 characters are just perfect, and I loved the like 3rd act conflict in this book. Usually I don't like a 3rd act conflict. Usually Tavia Lark doesn't even have really a 3rd act conflict, or it's not a super extreme one, but this one was crazy, and especially the reconciliation after, so good. Literally so good. I love this book so much. And you were probably asking, how do you have 3 books that you ranked higher to that one when you're freaking out over that book? And that's because the next book on the list is Prince and Bodyguard by Tavia Lark, which is her newest release, and it is book 4 in the Perilous Court series. It's kind of like a Shadowhunters sort of ish situation type of deal, where like there's different trilogy set in the same world in like the Tavia Lark universe. So the first 3 books of the Perilous Court series follow 3 princes who are all brothers, and then the second series in the Perilous Court series, second trilogy in the Perilous Court series, follows 3 other, they're not actually siblings, but they're 3 princes of the same country in like another country. So yeah, this is the first book in that new trilogy. But basically, this is a bodyguard romance, and it's also kind of got the bonding trope in it. So these 2 characters have been together for a really long time. They've been like master and bodyguard for many years, and they are also like blood bonded in a way. Like they are connected in more so than just being employer-employee. Basically, this book is beautiful. The pining in it is intense and incredible, and it's kind of like, oh, I can't tell him my feelings for him because it'll ruin our friendship, it'll ruin our bond, he'll think I'm taking advantage of him, all these different things. And in this book, there's also like cuddling for sanity. He doesn't let anyone but the bodyguard touch him or know his personal secrets. And then when the bond starts to strengthen, they can tell when they are touching themselves, when the other one's touching themselves. Crazy shit. So then when they finally hook up, it's just double the feelings. This book is so good. But again, there are just so many beautiful quotes in this book and like beautiful things that they think about one another that I highlighted the shit out of. I love this book. It was so good. So good. And then the final 2 books are kind of cheating because they're both rereads, but I did reread Eden and the Reek in, I think in July I read them with Robin. I will link her channel down in the description. She was reading the series, I think from my recommendation mostly, so I was like, oh, please let me buddy read these books with you, so I have an excuse to reread them. So Eden and the Reek are the second and third book in Lily Mayne's Monstrous series, which is a male-male romance series set in an apocalyptic world. Each book is a romance between a monster and human. And Eden and the Reek are 2 of my favorite in the series. Moth is like my number 1, but that's book 5 and she was reading 2 and 3. So I read 2 and 3 and they were amazing as always. Full 5 stars. Incredible. The romance, the world building, the plot, it's all just 5 stars, incredible. So those are all the books that I read in June, July, and August. Thank you for hanging out with me for this long ass video. I'm sure it's gonna be like 40 minutes long. Maybe it'll only be 30, I don't know. It's hard to tell right now. I have over an hour of footage of me just talking about these books. I tried to be short about it and I just couldn't be, but I hope maybe you can take some recommendations from me. I did love a lot of, like over half of the books that I read in this summer I would probably recommend are over like 3.5 stars. Anything like that I would recommend. I probably will not link all of the books in the description. I might link like my top 10 or 15 if you would like to purchase them through my affiliate links. That would be amazing. I earned like a teeny tiny commission from that. It would help support me and the channel if you would like to do that. If not, no hard feelings. It's just there if you want it. Free ways to support my channel are liking this video, subscribing to my channel, and leaving me a comment down below. You can let me know how your day is going. You can let me know the best book you read this summer. You can let me know the best book you read this year. Anything of that nature. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below, so definitely chat with me down there. You can also follow me on social media. I will have those links in the description down below. Most active on Instagram and Goodreads, I would say, but I have everything linked down there. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you being here and hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!